With it, I don't have to say her name. You've got the award winners of the Donostia Award this year, actress and producer Cate Blanchett. So I don't want to start by saying that Cate Blanchett is probably the closest to being a classical star that exists in this contemporary cinema. But she also belongs to modernity to a certain extent, and thinking about the characters she's portrayed, I've got a feeling she's an actress that works in the same time as a sign of an exclamation sign, but also a question mark, because she's an actress who is absolutely versatile in her exterior technique, but also prodigious in suggesting an internal connection with her characters. And most of her portrayals belong directly to the category of, I would dare say, a miracle. And I must say, and allow me to be subjective, you know who I am, and I've been doing this for you, but as a person from San Sebastián, it's a real honor that an actress like Cate Blanchett will receive an award called the Donostia Award. Her filmography is impressive, includes directors like Anthony Minghella, Sally Potter, Peter Jackson, Gillian Armstrong, Wes Anderson, Scorsese, Iñárritu, Spielberg, Fincher, Malick, Linklater, Guillermo del Toro, Todd Field, and many more. I'm just mentioning a few. And just this year, Guy Madden, Evan and Galen Johnson, or Alfonso Cuarón. But what the incredible thing, from my opinion, is that from her work, Cate Blanchett has made us accept terms such as the political issues, for example. She's a complete, well, the policy of authors, because we've got to talk about the policy of authors, but some of the films belong to her completely. And this is the first question. I'll let you ask questions in a moment, but I'm going to ask you a question and it's directed to your latest two work, Rumors and Disclaimer, where you offer two portrayals in the same year which are radically different. If you see Rumors this morning, you've been able to see it. My question to you is, how does Blanchett confront each new role, and these two roles in particular? What moves you to accept one project or two projects which are so different? What moves you to do that?
Well, first, hello. Gosh, feedback. I think I don't need translation for myself, so I'll take these out. Thank you so much. That was the very kind words. I think I run on instinct, as if it were gasoline. I think it's just timing, what comes up at the time. But the chance to work with Alfonso Cuarón and Guy Madden and his wonderful counterparts, the Johnson brothers. You know, I started off as an audience member, first and foremost, being fans of their work. And in terms of how I approach it, I mean, you say yes as soon as you are asked to participate in either of those great artists' endeavours. And for me, both of them were strangely an exercise in form. So the character was secondary to the formal exercise. Alfonso Cuarón is, one of the great cinema artists, and the fact that he was making cinema for the small screen, I found was absolutely compelling. How do you bring cinema and cinematic, keep the ideas big, the visuals big, and the scope, and the fact that cinema makes rhythmic sense, not necessarily narrative sense, as we were starting to discuss back there. And how do you hold fast to those ideas and yet bring it into people's homes? So I found that absolutely like a compelling investigation. And with Guy Madden, he's constantly, literally breaking cinema apart and putting it back together. So that was a sort of a wonderful fever dream of an experience. And as you say, they were totally and utterly different. And perhaps it's the difference that I find really compelling. Am I meant to speak in small chunks? Okay.
Can I go first? Okay. Hi, it's Alessandro Bizzotto from Players Magazine, Italy. Very nervous to be the first. Congratulations.
Don't worry, me too.
Which is great. Being here today, collecting an award not for the performance, but for your whole career, I'd like to know how you feel considering two things. The first one, I was watching again the talent of Mr. Ripley some weeks ago.
Yeah.
One of your performances I loved the most. But you said at that time that you were not in a hurry to get big leading parts and to grow very fast. And when you collected the Critics' Choice Awards a few years ago, you said that, and I do really appreciate that, you don't want awards to be horse races. They should be cultural events, awarding talent. So I'd like to know, how do you feel today collecting this award, considering what you said about Ripley years ago and about horse races? Thank you. Sorry if I've not been clear. I'm very nervous.
No. I think I can't even remember what I said about Ripley. It was so long ago. I just jumped at the chance of working with the late great Anthony Minghella, and and to be a part of that film, a film that would never have been made now. In that way. There's been another Ripley, wonderful, wonderful, different incarnation of that character and that set of circumstances, but entirely different. So I don't remember what I said, but I think maybe it was that I didn't get involved in the strange, mysterious art of acting to get anywhere in particular. I didn't have. You meet people, and I'm in awe of their singular ambition, and perhaps my ambition has been a bit more mitochondrial. It's had tentacles in lots of different directions, and so it's constantly taken me by surprise. But awards are wonderful things, and particularly, when you're awarded by the critics, or you're awarded by a culture that is not your own, that appreciates the work you've done, it's profoundly meaningful to me. And to be sandwiched in between Javier Bardem and Pedro Almodovar, two of the world's great cinema artists, is profoundly meaningful to me. So I'm enormously grateful for this honour, and I never ever take it lightly. But they always take me by surprise at the same time, that I've even had the chance to have a career. I started off in the theatre. It's still my singular great love, because you're so connected to your audience, and you do often get separated from your audience when you work in the cinema, particularly with streaming services who won't give you the numbers. So you don't want numbers necessarily for financial reward. You want to know how many people have seen it, or that hideous word, the eyeballs, that have been on the work that you've done. Yes, so it is, in answer to your question, very, very meaningful.
Enhorabuena.
Congratulations, Cate. I would like to ask you, throughout your career, what role has marked you the most, and also the directors that you've worked with, which has had the biggest impact and has marked you the most? Thank you.
Gosh. I don't think I can answer that question. I think it's in a strange way, not consciously, unconsciously, the role one accepts after the one that you've done previously is, in a strange, subconscious way, an antidote to the work that you've done before. When you get the chance to work with Terrence Malick, you might end up on the cutting room floor, but it doesn't mean the experience isn't seminal. But it's not just the directors you work with. It's the cinematographers, it's the costume designers, it's the makeup artists. It's the crew that you work with, the screenwriters, and the other actors that you work with. It's the ensemble that you work with. I'm always grateful to directors, and sometimes it's writer-led, who offer you something that takes you by surprise, that perhaps they see in you that you can't see in yourself, and therefore those stretches happen. And I think the last huge one for me that happened was working with Todd Field and Tar. It just felt, it was a mountain that I couldn't even begin to know how to climb. And I was absolutely terrified by it. But I've learned from many, many years in the theatre how to flip fear into excitement. I wish we could do that on the global stage, on the geopolitical stage. I wish we could turn fear into excitement. But yes, so that was probably the last one. But I've met so many. I'm profoundly lucky that I've worked with so many extraordinary directors who have given me extraordinary opportunities, some which have worked and some which have not. But doesn't mean the experiences weren't great.
Hola, María Guerra Quinótico.
Hi, Maria Guerra from Quinótico. Congratulations for the Donostia Award. It's a pleasure, enormous pleasure to see you here. And also, it's sad that I didn't see the film that you're going to make with Pedro Almodóvar. I haven't. And I've asked you whether you've talked to him, whether there's any possibility of that coming to fruition, and what's your relationship, that is to say, with Pedro Almodóvar. Thank you.
Oh, yes, I'm always talking with Pedro, and so happy for him in Venice. It was just a glory, and finally he's coming here to accept his award here, which is wonderful. And I was so touched that he and Penelope were there at the Goyas for me a few years back. He's a man of great taste and discernment and timing, and he knows what he can do and where he needs to make it. And we've been talking about it for 25 years. So I hope one day that something will happen. But an artist needs to go where they need to go, and that's why he is so profoundly not only talented, but his work is, no one could make the work he makes, because he makes it in the way that he needs to make it, which I absolutely respect.
Hello, congratulations for your Premio. How was creating the fascinating and sometimes despicable character of Lydia Tarr?
The unspeakable character of Lydia Tarr.
Sometimes despicable.
Despicable. I think we're all despicable in the end. Some of us are just better at hiding it than others. I think that's the thing, is that you have to allow the camera to see things that often the character doesn't see themselves. In a way, I found the structures that support people who are in positions of great authority, they're perhaps, if not more despicable than the person who often gets accused of certain things. But the film, I think, will stand the test of time. I think it hit the zeitgeist at the time when certain aspects of that film were very hot and buzzy. But I think it's actually, there's a lot of profundity in what Todd was reaching for, Todd Field was reaching for. And I think it's as much about the creative process, the brutality within the creative process, as it is about systemic abuses of power. And I think time will reveal that.
Hola.
Hi. I want to add myself to the congratulating you. In all your filmography, you've played a lot of different roles. Could you think a bit about all of them and tell us, if possible, what's the role with which you've had the best time or you've enjoyed the most, and the role which was perhaps more difficult for you to portray? Thank you.
I've been reading Clarice Lispector, the amazing Brazilian novelist, and she says, it takes an incredible amount of effort to be simple. And so often things that look effortless require an incredible amount of preparation so that you can leave that homework behind and just play. I do keep referring to the theatre. Maybe it's because I'm about to go back on stage. But I really loved working with Liv Ullmann on Streetcar. And then I really loved the chance of actually revisiting an echo of that character in Blue Jasmine. And so I love the fact that you can live with a character set of circumstance in a particular story, in a particular mise en scène, but yet, because there's an archetypical quality to that character, you can then experience a sort of a cinematic translation of that with an entirely different vision and entirely, with a filmmaker who's perhaps not that interested in theatre. So that was quite an interesting translation for me. And I had lived with playing Blanche Dubois for quite a long time across quite a lot of different audiences. So that was quite a profound one. That's what comes to mind. But ask me next Wednesday and I'll probably give you a different answer.
Garasi de Teledonosti.
Garasi de Teledonosti.
Me gustaría preguntarle.
I'd like to ask you, during your trajectory, there is a very relevant role for the LGBTI+, which is Carol, the character, and I would like you to tell you, how did you feel when you portrayed that role? Would you like to portray a character of an LGBTI+ personage? Plus, you're the best godmother that Cinderella can have, and congratulations for the award.
Thank you. Look, I think it speaks to, there is so much more to do in terms of representation on screen, but also, as importantly, behind the camera. But it speaks to how much has changed. We have to concentrate on the positive steps that have been made. When Carol first came to me, it was with a different director, and the money was so difficult to find. We couldn't get it made. And so I was running a theatre company at the time, and I went back to my day job, and then it got up and it got bad, and it took 10 years to get that film made. And it was really dangerous. No one wanted to fund it. No one wanted to distribute it. And people thought, well, no one's going to go and see it. But now, if you think about how many different people of different sexual identities and orientations we have represented on big and small screens, I think that it's profoundly different from the landscape when that came out. And perhaps it's been so meaningful to people, which means an incredible amount to me, and I know it does to Todd and to Rooney and everyone who was part of making that film, and Christine Vachon and Killip Films, who has long championed that quadrant of filmmaking. That the film came out and in a vacuum, really. Because it came out at a time when films like that just were not made. And we have to remember, it was the novel, the Highsmith novel, was written at a time. It felt sort of strangely, sadly, tragically, as revolutionary to make it 10, 15 years ago, as it was when she wrote it all those decades ago. And I think that that's a sad indictment. But I think we have to, now look at the cultural diversity on screen and think, we've got further to go, but we've made huge steps since that was made. And, I was still one of my all-time favourite experiences.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Cate. Good afternoon. I've read that you've shot you've made a film with Jim Jarmusch again. Is that right? And I wanted to know whether this is true. See, what was the experience with finding from the indie film making 20 years after Coffee and Cigarettes? Albeit that was one segment, and your role here is a bit longer than it was way back then. Thank you, and congratulations for the award.
Thank you. Yes, no, Jim was making a film straight after Coffee and Cigarettes. We had such a great time doing that, and Fred Elms shot it. It was amazing. We shot it in a crazy kind of continuous 48 hours, and I was playing both roles. It was so much fun. But, I had young kids and I couldn't keep working with him, and so we sort of unfortunately fell out of contact, and I couldn't work on other films with him. And so then this came up, and I was going to be working with Vicky Creeps, who I adore, and the wonderful Charlotte Rampling. And so it was fantastic. But in terms of indie filmmaking, I mean, it's as difficult for Jim to put a film together now than it was then. And, you know, I think it's still very difficult to finance films. But more importantly, I think it's profoundly difficult to guarantee that you're going to find an audience, because I think you may get the money to make it, but then what are the nefarious contracts that you have to sign, and then these things get buried and don't get seen. So that's where festivals are such an important life raft for cinema artists, you know, like Jim, so that there's a buzz and a build and a momentum and an awareness that's created around audiences. Because I, for one, want to go and see a Jim Jarmusch movie, and I think it's terribly sad that you think, well, you know, you're asking these days, well, where can I see it? You know, where will that be seen? So, yeah, I think we're all suddenly back into independent filmmaking, which is no bad thing from a creative point of view, but I think it's challenging when you consider that the ability to release these things is becoming increasingly complicated and endangered.
Hi, Kate. Hi. I'm Nerea from Movistar Plus. It's amazing to have you here. Congratulations for the prize. Rumors is a very weird film, sarcastic, dark, political film about power. I would like to know, what did you find so appealing about this project and about your character? And where did you get such a perfect German accent?
I wouldn't say it was perfect, my German accent. It was, look, I've always wanted to work with Guy Maddin, and I had seen Green Fog, which he'd done with Evan and Galen Johnson, where they'd been commissioned by the San Francisco Film Festival to make a film that celebrated San Francisco. So they reconstructed Vertigo with found footage of films that were made in San Francisco. I mean, no one else could even conceive of that than those three. There's an inherent kind of tongue-in-cheek madness and irreverence and technical genius that I'm in awe of, and I relished being around that. So I wanted to help get this film made, you know, a film about the G7 that meet every year to try and solve these crises, these rolling crises, ever-growing crises in the world. But they don't have the language to do it. It felt a little bit like an episode of Scooby-Doo to me, a fever dream and an episode of Scooby-Doo. But it has the deliberate evasion of narrative that Guy is a hallmark of the cinema that Guy makes. And also, I felt like I was with a brother, because he's got one foot in the theatre. You know, if you've ever had the experience to be in a cinema with a sort of a theatricalized version of his films, it's like nothing else. So it was really a fantastic experience.
Radio 4EB.
Radio 4EB, Australia.
Canadian and German co-production, and it is so between North American and in European country. During all your years of experience filming in Australia, North America and Europe, do you find that there are still distinctive differences between North American cinema and European cinema, or even Australian cinema? Or now with the globalization, the cinema is more homogeneous and more depending on producers and directors than the geographical location? And if you still find the differences, do you have any preferences working in North American movies or European or Australian movies? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I remember I was working, there's not a lot of call in international movies for Australian accents, so I often speak in accents that are not my own. I was talking with a dialect coach about how television has actually removed regional accents because we're all receiving the same sort of globalized news feed and television programs and one could think that and I think people who are perhaps bad at developing things would think that therefore there's a way of doing generalized storytelling that appeals to everybody. But I think that way lies creative death. I think the more culturally specific things are, the more powerful they have, more chance they have of being powerful in cultures other than their own. And that's where San Sebastian is so fantastic. It's celebrating filmmaking from the region and juxtaposing it against filmmaking that is made internationally. And I think there's a danger where we think we can try and create things that appeal to everybody, which is, of course, you can never start making anything from that point of view. But look, I am Australian, and I'm an Australian who's been lucky enough to work in many different cultures with directors who speak many different languages, and in culturally specific works like Rumours was filmed in Budapest by three directors who had only left Winnipeg maybe one time before, and with people from all over the world. So you couldn't have got something perhaps more culturally diverse than that, and bonkers as that. But I am Australian, and so I'm constantly invested in the development of the film industry there. I think it's an incredibly powerful filmmaking culture that punches above its weight, as the expression goes, given what a small community it is. So I'm always referring back to that and drawing from that wellspring.
Yeah, hi, Cate. This is Benjamin Snow, and
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks for being here. So I'm an
thank
actor.
you.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'm an actor, half German, half American. I live in the UK now, and I definitely got to ask you this question very quick. So, from an acting perspective, right? You probably know the phrase "preparation meets opportunity."
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't know that? Oh,
Opportunity.
really?
No, I've learned
Preparation
something.
meets opportunity. So you always got to be ready when the opportunity comes along. So-
You can never be ready. That's
really?
just telling you that right now.
God damn it.
You're never ready.
I was always trying to be ready. Okay, damn it. Okay, I missed that one. But I just definitely wanted to ask you, from an acting perspective, you focus on auditions and you have rejection, right? You have rejection over rejection. And then at some point as an actor, you ask yourself, okay, wait a minute. Should I focus on auditions, or is it really about the networking side? You got to meet the right person who gives you that one shot that you need to put you on the map, and then you move forward. So what is your advice to somebody like me, for example, trying to get on the map to get to the next level?
Wow, yes.
I know, crazy question. I know.
Unfortunately, yes. It's a lot of opportunity and is luck and timing, which is not what you want to hear. When I came out, I know so many talented, incredibly talented actors who don't work nearly as much as they could, as they should, as they'd like to. But you also, it's amazing, you see a lot of incredibly talented actors who then drop off the so-called map, and then we rediscover them again. Like Kevin Kline, who I've just worked with, had semi-retired. And audiences are going to be blown away yet again by having not seen him for a while. But when I first came out of drama school, and drama school doesn't work for everybody, but it did, I found it very useful. I didn't work like a lot of my counterparts. And someone who ran then one of the biggest casting agencies took a shine to me and asked me to come in and be a reader opposite people who were auditioning for this is when I couldn't get arrested as an actor, and I was weird looking. No one knew what to do with me. And I probably didn't know what to do with myself, to be perfectly frank. And I would read. I would go in, and 3 or 4 times a week, I would spend 3 or 4 hours reading opposite people who were auditioning, and I would be in the room, as sort of an object, and they would talk about the actor before they came in and after they left. And you realised a lot of those decisions are not personal. And a lot of those decisions are made before they walk in. Who has already been cast, whether they're too short or too small. And unfortunately, and this has changed, women would get talked about in a certain way, which I'm sure happens less and less. I would hope so. But I realised that it's not personal. And often those actors who walked in and thought, I'm not sure whether I want to work with this director, or I'm not really sure if I want the role. I'm going to use this to try and find out if I do want the role. So they would claim back some space to play in an audition and ask questions and make the space their own. And invariably, they're the ones who maybe got a call back. But I think the big takeaway from me is it's not personal. And sometimes you have to work out, do I want this job? How much do I want this job? And because not every job is necessarily worth taking. And then I would take jobs that people couldn't see an opportunity in. I'd die on page 9. And they were saying, no, don't you want the bigger part? I went, no, that's the interesting role. So you can actually make opportunities in the things that other people don't perceive as opportunities. So I think you have to sort of work out what the opportunities are for you. I suppose take a little bit more agency. You've got more agency than you think. I don't know, I hate advice. I hated people giving me advice, so I don't, take it or leave it.
Hi, Cate.
Hello.
Michelle Martin from Trevara Sustainable Media Platform. Congratulations on your prize. And
thank you.
Perhaps more importantly, I'd like to thank you for continually sharing your time and your platform to raise awareness about the urgency of climate action and sustainability. We know we have a deadline to get to net zero, and we also know that there's a business case for sustainability in the film and TV industry. So to give this conversation more attention in the media without getting played off stage, I would love to know if you have any specific changes or commitments you'd like to see from colleagues in the industry to help the industry move forward to achieve net zero and sustainability in the near future, hopefully.
Yeah, we're a very public-facing industry. I mean, it's a very obvious thing to say. And we make a lot of documentaries about anthropogenic climate change. We make a lot of films where climate disaster is the backdrop. But yet we're very slow to pivot to make the work in a more sustainable way. And having led a very large theatre company, to become a leading green theatre company, I know that there is not only a financial incentive to do so, alongside the moral imperative to do so, but there's an incredible creative opportunity there to make work differently. And I find it bizarre that we were able, as an industry, whereas a lot of industries were slow, the cinema industry pivoted incredibly quickly during the pandemic to find ways to make work. Suddenly, there was money for a COVID officer to make sure that everyone was safe and secure and the work could progress. And I would just say, as a conversational gambit, why don't we have a green officer to make sure that there's embedded in pre-production? Because if you start doing it while you're shooting, it's only ever going to be an add-on. It's not going to affect the way you make work, where you decide to shoot, how you decide to shoot there. We made a film with the wonderful Warwick Thornton, which came here to the festival. And we decided that we were going to make it in a green way. And it took a lot of organising because those song lines, those structures are still not in place, embedded. And we had to do a lot of planning. And it cost us a little bit of money, but in the end, it also saved us a bit of money. So it became cost neutral. And I think the more commonplace these ways of working become, the more embedded they become in the way we create the work, the more cost-effective they become and cost-neutral. And in fact, the theatre company that I'm referring to, the Sydney Theatre Company, it saved us an incredible amount of money, and it brought in a whole new range of audiences who were fascinated to experience a piece of theatre, knowing that their carbon footprint was incredibly low. Because obviously theatre it happens under lights, and it's it's an intensive user of electricity, and knowing that that is actually good for the planet and enjoyable. It's not hair shirt. You start to affect the way people think about what they can do in their own small way at home. But I do think it's upon us as an industry. It's like the same thing with the inclusivity conversation, which is so important to have. The more homogenous things are in front of the screen, in the writer's room, the more banal the work becomes over time. The more homogenous any board is of any organisation, you're never going to have systemic change. And so I think if we start to embed those things in the way we make work, the work will be energised by it. No more questions. See, start talking about climate change and everyone leaves the room. It's sexy, I promise you.
Hola, Cate. Bueno, soy una apasionada.
Hi, Cate. I'm very excited by your work. Congratulations. Oh, sorry.
See, I'd left the room.
See,
I was imagining the world differently. So, I'm so sorry. What did you say?
Sí, no, que me apasiona tu trabajo.
I'm very excited. I love your work as an actress, and congratulations for this recognition, for all the recognitions that you've received and will receive. I would like to ask you a question, perhaps political or humanistic. In Cannes, you wore a dress with the Palestinian flag, if I recall. I'm not too sure whether it's a question or a regret. What do you think what we could do vis-a-vis this pain and this horror that's taking place there?
Did I regret wearing a dress?
Yes.
I
No.
don't particularly want to be naked on the red carpet.
No.
Naked in front of the camera.
No, Cate, no. She's referring to you wore a dress with a Palestinian flag on it. It looked all Palestinian colours, and she was wondering whether we should address that issue of the Palestinian issue due to the horror and everything that's happening in Palestine. She seemed to have seen a Palestinian flag on the dress you were wearing in Cannes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry.
Right.
Okay, sorry, my mistake perhaps. I wasn't clear.
No,
okay.
Not at all. Look, I think it's. I think that there's a lot of conflicts, abuses of human rights, conflicts that we can see and conflicts that we know are happening, but we can't even touch, and we all feel very powerless about it. The world is a very, very complicated place, and I think the right to protest around the world is an incredibly important thing to enshrine. It's part of living in a democracy. We have to listen to one another, and all points of view need to be heard. There's a lot of wounds but I don't think any of these things are necessarily going to be solved on the red carpet or by me inflaming and making statements about it. It's too complicated and too important.
Okay, desgraciadamente.
Okay, unfortunately we have to stop here. We've gone over a little bit of time. We have to finish now. Big round of applause for Cate Blanchett. Thank you.